Ladies and gentlemen, at Boya and at Bamenda, there was one theme song that kept on coming up, that was sung, and it was "Courage, Brothers, Do Not Stumble." I looked around, I was hesitant, but I feel that we would be doing justice to the cause if we here, if you guys here in Washington do not start off this conference with that same what has been dubbed the Anglophone national anthem. So I guess a lady should come up and intune the song, please. Madam. Please, Madam. Courage, brothers, do not stumble. Okay.
Courage, brothers, do not stumble. No life of the darkest light. Their sense of to guide their humble, trust in God and do their right.
As you might have noticed, we haven't said a prayer. We've sung a song. It's everything. It's a prayer and a song. Courage, brothers, do not stumble. We are dedicating our cause to God, hoping that in our struggle, He would help us, do the right thing. And so I think it would be superfluous at this stage to ask anybody to say a prayer again. That having been said, I find myself in a difficult position where I have to make a few prefatory remarks which would in some way be usurping some of the powers that belong to the chairman of the Scnc. But the program was so arranged that for the last, the Jews should come last. The first thing that I noticed is, this conference is referred to as the Cameroon All Anglophone Conference, USA. But I would like to reiterate the Bamenda Proclamation, which served notice to the world that AAC2 was the last AAC conference. There was supposed to be no AAC conference after Bamenda. I take this opportunity to say that we stand by the proclamation. We stand by the proclamation. That having been said, there is still a need, however, for this particular conference, which, as I see, has a role that to begin to inform deterritorialized Southern Cameroonians as to what happened in Bamenda, but more so to have your views on this particular issue, for your views are important just as those that are spawned back home, and they have to be incorporated into the documents that would serve as working documents for the Scnc. Secondly, I think we should take this opportunity to reaffirm our motto that the AAC stands by not the argument of force, but the force of argument. That is the AAC motto. But at the same time, we would want to serve notice, the same notice that Gandhi served to the British Viceroy in 1931 in South Africa, that it is not a matter of carrying conviction by argument. The matter resolves itself into one of matching forces. The presence of the honorable members sitting at the podium today serves as testimony to that fact that we are determined to match force with force. Force does not necessarily translate into violence. Force in this particular instance is shown by the fact that people back home, despite the dire economic straits that they go through, have been willing to dip into their pockets to contribute 200 francs or whatever to make this trip possible. They have been willing to contribute in terms of ideas, and that is what makes up our force. Our force too comes from the fact that the government of La République du Cameroon has fostered for 34 years an instrumental reading of official history. 34 years ago, we went into the Union convinced that the Cameroon idea could work. Cameroon with a K. During 34 years, we have found out that we have been operating on different frequencies. La République du Cameroon has its own Cameroon idea, but it's Cameroon with a C and Cameroon with an O-U-N. What does all this mean? It means that the Anglophone has no place in La République du Cameroon. This has their success, if any. They have been able to colonize our consciousness, and it's as a result of this that we find people who are still willing to endorse the prevailing structures of power, and it is this endorsement that allows for their uncontested functioning. We must tolerate them, for they are like infants who still seek the truth. And the truth can be found only in the development of consciousness. Thus, we argue that conflict and violence are not necessary for the decolonization of consciousness. They only have to develop their consciousness. No doubt, the Francophone regime would fight against this, for the development of consciousness is a threat to the very reproduction of the exploitative relationship that obtains in Cameroon. Relations between groups in every society have to be constructed, articulated, and maintained. This is the way in which communities are constructed, not because of some essential element within them. Communities may be negative moments of resistance against oppression and control. Communities may be negative moments of resistance against oppression and control. We sit in here today not because there is an essential element that marks us out as Anglophones, I think. If there is one, I would ask. As groups thus construct communities, in the face of oppression. Ladies and gentlemen, our fathers and brothers sitting up here, who also represent our mothers and sisters, are here to tell us their stories of oppression. And these stories must be told, for telling functions in many ways or in many cases to help empower those who feel marginalized and occasionally voiceless. And that is the situation of the Anglophone in La République du Cameroon. To be sure, this is not to suggest that the mere task of feeling less marginalized or more aware is in itself a solution to a better life. For that would be to conflate an epistemological position with an ontological one. It is only to suggest that unless such stories as these are told, it may be hard to help mobilize those for whom a given identity, a social situation, or condition of being has taken on an aura of fixed, immutable, and transcendental reality. Unless these stories are changed, these people would feel that their conditions are fixed, immutable, and constitute transcendental reality. So that is why the honorable gentlemen sitting at the podium have traveled several miles, several hours, hear their stories. We would like to use this occasion, I think they would like to use this occasion as a sounding board. And for that, they would, I think, want to hear from you guys first. They have framed the struggle, they have framed the terms of reference, and they want to hear from you, to take from you what they can take from you, before telling you, what it is that they think where the struggle, defining where the struggle goes from here. That having been said then, I think we should move on with the program by firstly calling on the community leaders here in the States to say a few words. I would start off with Dr. Christopher Atta from Houston, Texas, who I see jotting down a few words. I hope he's ready by the time I finish my statement. Dr. Atta.
Our honorable and distinguished guests from Southern Cameroon, conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to seize this opportunity to thank the conference organizers for giving me this opportunity to address this august assembly. Let us briefly examine some of what I consider problems encountered by the student population in Houston. I don't know if this can be generalized, but I would just focus on Houston, where I come from. After a critical analysis of the situation in Houston, I came to find out that most Southern Cameroonians there demonstrate this "I don't care" attitude. They don't seem to care less. They take care of themselves and forget the fact that they can really contribute ideas and efforts to ameliorate the situation which is happening back home. They nurse the wrong feeling that they live comfortably in quotes, because I don't see any comfort in some of these things. And since you do not need media, you don't have to tell me anything. That is very un-Cameroon. And that's what is very common. And with this type of spirit, I don't think we'll get very far. The second thing I realized is that most Cameroonians there are very ignorant of what is happening in Cameroon, not to talk of the history of Cameroon. Is it not shameful to hear that in 1994, a Cameroonian stood up in an international conference to say that the economy of Cameroon is flourishing under the chairmanship or the presidentship of Amadou Ahidjo? Just last year, a Cameroonian stood up to make a statement like this. Fortunately, there were knowledgeable people there who put him down and said, my friend, Ahidjo died many years ago. And that's a Cameroonian giving this information out in the USA. It's really, I think it's not a laughing matter, honestly. It's a serious matter and we should look into it very seriously. Then the third concern is the way the brothers of southern Cameroons, the way they look at themselves, northwest and southwest. The dichotomy between the two provinces. It's a shame. When people at home have tried to iron out this, you see it's so common in the Eastern area. You would be surprised to hear that when a preparatory meeting was summoned to prepare for this meeting, out of the 200 Cameroonians who are in Houston, 18 showed up, and 2 of the Southwest origin. These are facts, and there are things that will make us not go forward with this struggle whatsoever. So I would like to really dwell on this thing. I won't tell you anything new about what we're here for, the struggle, the just cause we're looking for. I just want to highlight some of these problems. If the CAP fits other states in the USA, please, let's take note that these are things that will help us not achieve our objectives. When the organizers of this conference informed me that I was going to participate in it, I extended the invitation to all the southern Cameroonians in Houston. I called a meeting. I didn't want it to be a one-man show. And as I told you before, 18 people showed up. And I made it in such a way that I wanted them to contribute ideas which would table this August assembly. So they came up with some ideas which I will share with you. And we consoled ourselves in the fact that you don't have to need the whole of Houston to come out to make change possible. A few people can go ahead, do it, and others may follow. They were very concerned about what they've heard very often, that there was a document which was supposed to be signed 10 years after the unification by Honorable Dr. Foncha and late Amadou Ahidjo. They want to know something about it, know where the document is, but it could be retrieved for the SCPC to follow up and see what they can do about it. They raised another problem, or they were worried about the position of the 11th province. Some of them came there and thought that they were not given any position, either in the Republic or in southern Cameroon. In spite of the fact that I tried to explain to them that they've been incorporated, I mean the members of the 11th province, that is our brothers who, from the French Cameroon, who grew up with us in southern Cameroon, they've been given executive status in both the Cameroon Anglophone movement and in the SCPC. They didn't believe me, so I said, well, I will table this in the conference so that if our honorable visitors go back, they could get people who are in the executive of these bodies to write something to convince the people here that there is no fear for those who come from the 11th province that today to suffer some sort of marginalization when that time comes. Then the people of Houston strongly support the idea of return to federation, with the option of secession as the last resort. That's the experience this thing for the past 34 years, and enough is enough. That they would support the idea of the SDPC, that we should go ahead. And finally, they gave me an envelope, what I would call a widow's mite of $265. And I will discuss this with Mr. Mbide and Mr. Mancho, and I will give the names of those who contributed what and discuss income expenditure. I wish to use this opportunity to thank you again, the organizers, and I hope we can come up with some meaningful suggestions to help emancipate Southern Cameroons. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Atta. I am tempted to say we are more interested in your money, but we are. Thank you more for your ideas, and thank you also for your money. I would call I would call directly on Mr. Chris Abine, please, to take the podium. And to the ladies and gentlemen sitting in the audience, please, we hope, the fact that certain people are being called to the podium doesn't mean that they have a monopoly over speech. We hope that by the end of the day, each and everyone sitting in here would be able to contribute ideas that will help push this movement forward. Mr. Abine, from Houston, Texas, I guess.
I'm from Abilene, Texas, but I'm a friend to the guys in Houston. I was asked to present a speech and he's telling me 10 minutes. I don't think I'll be able to read my speech in 10 minutes. It's surely not going to take 10 minutes for us to liberate ourselves. And the liberation must start with the ideas that we have to share. Anyway, I'll try to limit it to 10 minutes. If I can, I'll just go on. This summer, I have an opportunity to host in my apartment a young man from Sierra Leone. And he used to live in the university residency and had to move out because they closed these things during the summer. He's a very young friend of mine. I would say the age of my son. He's about 4 years older than my son. But we are becoming very great pals. He's a pre-law and political science student, second year. And I have really the great opportunity of having very meaningful intellectual exchanges with him. The more I talk with this young man, I discover still that some of the intellectual or academic problems we have in Cameroon is not only a Cameroonian problem, like Dr. Adam just mentioned about the problem he has in Houston, but it's an African problem. We seem to have embarked in the journey of intellectual or academic endeavors with all the wrong reasons. The more we get educated, the more greedy we become. The more PhDs we get, the more unpatriotic we become, and the more we can easily stigmatize those who are patriotic and want changes as radicals. I get that a lot from most of the Anglophone professors in the email. The best Anglophone who is educated, the best civilized Anglophone is the one who can show the Francophones that he's not a radical. He believes in one Cameroon. Cameroon cannot be divided. He condemns violence. Any person who is talking about Anglophone, Francophone in Cameroon is a violent person. My friend from Sierra Leone received a letter from his father, from Freetown. His younger sister was being prepared for circumcision. Female circumcision is common, like most of you know, in some region, and it was in this part of Africa where my friend comes from. And I think it's becoming a problematic topic of some of the universal things that we occupy ourselves with. My friend did not actually support the idea of a sister going through circumcision, but he believed that there was nothing he could do about it. All he could see was a big, thick wall of impossibilities that stood in front of him. And every view he had about things existing in this country or any other place was just static. Sierra Leone has a big problem. I think the rebel war with the young drug president and the young military man who took over power for whatever reason. And I think there's a rebel approaching the capital. This my young friend is very concerned about his parents. He's doing everything to get his parents out of Sierra Leone. The issue of the war, of the rebels attacking, is not his problem. We discussed this and I tried to talk to him. I said I feel like if he already has the opportunity to be in a university, that meant that a university education is expected to give him the possibility of changing certain things in his community that he did not like. The common thing that he would say to me is that this is a practice for many, many years. There is nothing he could do to change it. He was just not the kind of person that would think that his education goes beyond him having a lucrative jobs, having all the nice material things, having a big name and maybe a title of doctor added to it. Not for the community, not for anything else, just for him and his family. Anyway, I succeeded in convincing him that I find that it was possible for him to do something about it. So by the time I was flying from Texas to here for this conference, there was a letter in the mail to his father telling him the first step was for him to tell his father that he rejected the idea of his junior sister being circumcised. That was the beginning, and you would not be surprised if just from that mail letter and my conversation with this young man, a revolution would start in Sierra Leone, that young people and young ladies would get up and start challenging the aspect of circumcising them. It must start from somewhere. All we look for and is to take the courage to look for a starting point where we want to start. Southern Cameroonians found themselves in a similar situation as my friend. It is common for us to say we can never go back. We have been in this thing for over 10 years. What is Foncha and Mona coming to do in Washington? They brought us here, what are they coming to do? We have been with these people, we can never go back. We don't have a military, we don't have anything. We lived in Nigeria for about 40 years, yet we moved out of Nigeria. All they have known is to resign themselves to what has been their Frenchification. I don't know whether that is the right word, but I just put it there. Their Frenchification by the Republic of Cameroon. Like Dr. Benjua said, I spelled that Cameroon with a U. It's not double O. And to many of them, the walls of impossibility stand high in their face. And even though they may hate what has become of them and their country, what is, that is in quote, the is in quote, as they live now cannot be changed. There is no starting point for this high-level pessimism. A people who have enjoyed autonomy and breathed the fresh air of democracy, even during the days when they were under legal and legitimate foreign administration, were gradually and surely lured into subjecting themselves to dictatorship and annexation. A people who were used to choosing their leaders today see themselves being imposed administrators who cannot even communicate with them in the language they understand. Our territory was annexed under our own eyes, but all we saw for over 3 decades was no starting point, because we totally forgot our Bible story of David versus Goliath. We fainted at even the thought that it could be possible that we cry out against the heavy weight of the continued forces of La République du Cameroon and France that choked us. In the streets and the political homes of southern Cameroon, suffering under annexation and assimilation, the stories were the same. Never would it be able to complain. Never would we get the Federation again. Never would we get our independence. Never, 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 to any spark of hope that was proposed for restoration of our dignity. We were over 3 decades blind from seeing our starting point to erasing the constitutional abuse of 1972 and the political blunder of 1984. From 1990, when the so-called wind of change was moving across the country westward bound, the force of southern Cameroonians, we have our distinguished gentlemen who are the conveners here. I have a poem prepared for you here, so I'll distribute it free of charge. Thank you. The birth of this baby marked the beginning of a new era in the history of southern Cameroon, and I may add, of that of La République du Cameroon in its dealings with southern Cameroons. The holding of the Old Anglophone Conference was the only thing purely southern Cameroonian that has taken place in that country since 1972. We all felt like birds that were released from their cages and we realized how long we have stayed in the cage and how high we could really fly. And to determine how high we can fly is the reason why we are all gathered here. To determine how high we can fly is the reason why we are offering peace. To determine how high we can fly is the reason we have this important delegation from Cameroon. To determine how high we can fly is the reason Mr. Foncha humbled himself to tell southern Cameroonians gathered for the first All-Anglophone Conference in Boya he was sorry, and to show how much he means that, he is here today to learn his last moment support to see us fly high again. It takes courage and character for anyone to do what Mr. Foncha and St. Muna are doing today. And I am thankful that we are blessed to still have these, our fathers, with us, and more so since they are not just sticking around, but they are willing to assist us get out of whatever errors they may have gotten us into through naivety of the politics of yesteryears. Thank you, Mr. Foncha. Thank you, Mr. Muna. We were angry with you both, but we are pleased that you have taken our feelings seriously and you are willing to help us put the past behind us and move on. It is important for the critic to recover the historical matrix of ideas and to understand the social and personal dynamics which brought them to birth. But the historical occasion, once it is past, is more or less irrelevant and serve for the purposes of illustration. Very few of us would have done much better leaving Africa and coming to New York in the 50s. The greatest critics of the Foncha era, Mr. Mukong and Foncha, have, with the passing of time, distinguished themselves as false prophets. For those who have eyes to see and to see through them and the courage to say what we see. But even these two we put behind us, the justness of our struggle, and the faith that we have in God come to us, that God will come to us as he did go to Egypt to liberate the oppressed. We create a building automatic device to weed out the false prophets amongst us. The era of worshipping the golden calf that took us away from our focus has come to its own end. Our people created the new liberty struggle in Bamenda, which was corrected in Boya, but corrupted in Yaoundé. From Boya to Bamenda, from AAC Standing Committee to SCPC, from the Boya Declaration to the Bamenda Proclamation, from the AAC Draft Constitution to the Boya Peace Initiative, we have demonstrated to the Cameroonian people and the rest of the world that we are a people who choose peace and dialogue in conflict resolution. We begged for the respect of our union contract in the Boya Declaration, the Federal Draft Constitution, the Bamenda Proclamation, and others. We sang out loud for a return to the 1961 legalities. Today, we are begging for peace as we present our package for a peace and amicable constitutional divorce between us and our Republic of Cameroon. The world can see our love for peace in the Boya Peace Initiative, BPI. It's up to us to make the choice whether we want to live as a free people or as a captured people. Just as God liberated the oppressed from slavery to freedom and walked them across the miracles of the dry lands of the Red Sea and the frozen waters of the Jordan River, so too he will move us westward across the Mongo Bridge to put up our new flag beneath the Fako Mountains as we shall gloriously sing the song of the free birds without shooting any guns nor hurting anyone. Yes, we shall do it this way, and we think always non-violence because we are a peace-loving people. But let no one be misunderstood. Let no one misunderstand our nature. Let no one think that they can again exploit our patient love for peace to abuse our very existence. Just as we love peace, so too we love to carry out our obligations and duties. We once heard Biya telling his people and us that if we love peace, we must prepare for war. A peace-loving people must be prepared to protect and defend their people and territory from external aggression. Because we are peace-loving people, we must patriotically fight to keep our existence and dignity. We, just as Gideon subdued the multitude of the Midianites and the Amalekites with only 300 men, so shall the Lord of hosts deliver those who attempt to invade us into our hands. For the commander of the Lord's army shall lead us to battle. Our cause is a just one, and we shall appeal to the heavenly council to watch over us. The canons of democracy requires that we free ourselves and defend our freedom. We must teach our children the rationale of our struggle for independence and pass it on from generation to generation. The flames of this struggle must be kept to burn to celebrations. Posterity must know that our generation had hopes that by doing our patriotic duty today, we would leave them a better tomorrow and a country they would be proud of. Like Daniel, we have survived living in the lion's den for over 3 decades. Some of our patriots sacrificed their blood along the way for us to move on, and our courage is built around their supreme sacrifice and our faith in God. I can see the agonizing image of my friend and CPC Bali classmate, Chen Gandhi, and many others who fell into the torture machines of La République of Cameroon and the French. If most of us are alive today, we must thank God for giving us the opportunity to live long enough to see this struggle at this stage and progressing. Most of us will fall before we get to our final destination, but the spirit must be that If we do fall, the rest must continue to the final destination. Like Jonah, we cannot run away from the call to fight for our freedom. Jonah thought he could run away from God's Nineveh assignment, but besides himself, he ended up in Nineveh in the belly of a fish. We may feel we have saved ourselves the burden of our patriotic obligations by hiding in distant and privileged countries, but our consciences would sooner or later get us to the foot of Mount Fako, and if we refuse to listen to those silent voices of our consciences, posterity shall place a curse on us. The more we ask the lion men of La République du Cameroon and France to let us go, the more they ask our taskmasters to increase our afflictions. The hearts of the lion men are hardened against us each day, with each step to take in the process of seeking a peaceful liberation. But as Moses sang thus, the horse and his rider has he thrown into the sea. Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea. His chosen captains all are drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank into the bottom as a stone. I also exhort you today, Commander-in-Chief of our army, and he will fight for us to victory. All he is asking of us is faith, courage, and the defeat of fear. Finally, let me share the following verses from Ecclesiastes 3, 1 to 8 with you. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heavens. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to plow that which is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to give away. A time to reign, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace. These are verses of wisdom indeed. And it should not surprise anyone that they made the canon of the Old Testament. And we do not need any high-level exegesis to understand the message in them. Our time has come to implement that which we have so eloquently presented to ourselves and the world. Where we just engage in an intellectual exercise to impress and to scare, or is it the character, faith and conviction in us to stand for what, or for that which is just and right, that has been the driving force in us doing what we have done to this day? Whatever it was and is, the moment of truth is now, and the world would have the opportunity of knowing who we really are. From what we do from now henceforth, we would either be treated seriously or become objects of international entertainment and ridicule. I have always fought with you, and I will always fight with you until victory is ours. I can always count on my total and unbending loyalty. I welcome our patriots and leaders from Cameroon. Courage, brothers. Do not stumble even though your paths are dark as night. The guardian star would lead you through. Unto thee, O Lord, we lift up our souls. O God, our God, we trust in thee. Let us not be afraid. Let not our enemies triumph over us. Thank you.
As you must have noticed, Chris is an ancient combatant. since returning to the States, he's decided to marry his militancy with liberation theology. And what you just heard is the product of those two approaches. But I think there are certain themes that have been hit on. Chris talked about them, Dr. Atan somehow alluded to them, but I think I should put them to the floor. Normally, the English, those same English that put us where we are, like to say that what the father wishes to forget, the son and grandson, or the children and grandchildren might want to remember. Dr. Foncha and Honorable Estimon are here today to refute that saying. They don't want to forget. They, like their children and grandchildren, want to remember. They have lived with 34 years. These same 34 years that all of us have lived through. Who could keep their words of honor or their word of honor? They didn't. Now is not the place nor the time to begin to vilify anybody. We all are responsible. We all are responsible. You guys live in a country where Jefferson did say that the struggle for independence does not take a year, a decade, centuries might be involved in it. Our struggle for independence did not end in 1960 or 1961, as the case might be. It's been 3 decades down the line. And please energize yourself, for the struggle is still starting. And thank God we still have these icons here, Dr. Foncha and Honorable Estimona, to help prod us on. That having been said, Dr. Modwa, please come to the podium.
Fellow Cameroonians, ladies and gentlemen, I come from the small Cameroonian community in Delaware, about an hour and a half from here. We have had a lot of liberation theology. I'm going to go into a little bit of liberation mythology. The fundamental basis for a struggle is spiritual. It has to come from deep within, and it has to last a long time, and it has to go through generations. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about what is going to sustain this struggle. And I have thought about the Bible. I've looked for stories in the Bible which could act as an allegory for what we are going through. And I rejected them. They do not really come from an African source. I think that in order for our struggle to be really genuine, it has to come from an African source. Sometimes one reads stories or one hears stories and really wonders about what the importance of those stories are. I'll tell you one story which I had the good luck to read as a child, thanks to Dr. Daniel Lantum. It's a Cameroonian story. It comes right from our source. And when I read this story as a kid, I thought it was a really horrible story. I didn't know how to make sense of it, but it makes sense. It makes perfect sense today. Now, this is the story of Ba and Wanyeto. Now, this is the story, as far as I can remember it, you know, I read it about 30 years ago. Now, you had two friends in the land of Zor, Wanyeto and Ba. Now, they were very close, just like brothers. Now, Wanyeto was a mythological figure who used to perform a lot of tricks, like he used to live on tricks, like the fox or the tortoise, and a lot of other African stories. Now, for some reason, which wasn't clear, and still is not clear, these two guys decided that they were going to kill their mothers. They made a pact that they were going to kill their mothers. So, they decided to kill their mothers at the stream. So Wanyeto said, I will go upstream. So Ba naively took his mother downstream, and the other guy took his mother upstream, and then he saw blood. Now what? He thought, oh, my friend has killed his mother, so he put the knife on his mother's neck and through the carotid artery, and the water flowed with blood. Now what he didn't know was that his friend had either taken a red dye or had taken an animal up there and killed it, and that's what had turned the water red. So they went on with life, and they used to do everything together. They used to go to farms together, and what he didn't know was that Wanyeto had put his mother in the banda. And everything seemed to be fine. One version of the story says that Ba got to know about what his friend had done from a song. A bird was used to sing a song and told the story. The other version was that Wanyeto used to have well-prepared meals, and he used to thrive, although both of them used to go to the farm together. So his friend put two and two together. Whatever the case was, this was the situation. Now, the reason why this story is so important to me is because, like the great stories in the Bible, it hits right home, it hits you right there. It's a very horrible story, and it says it all. I'll tell you another story, a little bit more personal. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was from the Bassar region of Cameroon. As you know, there are many of those people who grew up in Anglophone Cameroon or in Southern Cameroon, who originally Bamileke, Doualas and so on, who grew up in West Cameroon, or who moved across during the colonial days. Now, the reason people like my grandfather moved over was because of something called Jock Massey. I have tried to think about the origins of that word. The origins of that word is jock machine, and it refers to the railroad which initially the Germans and then the French were building using basically slave labor. A lot of people died from jock massey, working for free for the white man under horrible conditions. So now I thought about the irony of the fact that my grandfather ran to freedom in Southern Cameroon, and I'm running away from Southern Cameroon. So I'm standing here right in front of you 2 generations later, and really the same thing has happened. So where are my children going to run to? To the moon? To Mars? So I think this thing has really got to come to an end. The reason why I'm telling you these stories is because I think that the struggle, I'll remind of 5 more minutes, or 2 more minutes. The struggle has to be inside as well as outside. So we have to appeal to those people who know how to write, who know how to create music, poetry. We need to put these things down on paper, we need to put it into music, we need to put it into a form which energizes people at a very fundamental level. We do not need to go into major gymnastics with academics and so on. We should be able to keep the struggle on. If we have to do it for another 100 years, so be it.
Dr. Munzo, I see he has copious notes. I get afraid when I see Munzo with more than a page of notes. You might have to sit here until tomorrow morning. Dr. Munzo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Jua has a way of playing tricks on people. And one of them is to give the impression that someone who is reluctant to speak is itching to do so. I am reluctant because without wanting to use the worn-out cliche, it seems to me that after listening to people these past 3 hours, all that one could say has been said. So what else would one add? As I listened to one of the speakers, the one who brought up this point about the youth being marginalized, I think it was the distinguished lady president of CAMSA USA. I remember that yesterday, when this delegation was meeting officials of the UN in New York, the delegation pointed out that it was made up of various generations as a way of bringing home to the UN that the Southern Cameroon's question is one which cuts across generations in our country. They might have been under the illusion that they had some young people in the delegation. I was not the youngest yesterday. I'm not so sure I am today, maybe I am. But one assurance I want to give you is that at least in the Southern Cameroon Sports Conference, the youth are not neglected. We don't know whether we can use the youth in every role, but we think that the youth have a particular role and they will play it very well. To the extent that you'll be pleased to know that amongst the organizations within or under the SCPC umbrella, there is what we call the Southern Cameroon's Youth Organization, which has its own Southern Cameroon's Youth Council, an integral part of the Southern Cameroon People's Conference. Perhaps if it were not term time, as it is in Cameroon still, we would have brought some of them along to demonstrate to you that they are integrated into the cause. That's a small point. The other small point I would like to clarify, or maybe to clear, is that a lot has been said